the US News spent a total of 54 minutes covering 44 trans murders in 2020. I should note those 44 murders are of gender non-conforming people just in the US alone. So we're not on about globally, there were 44 trans people murdered. Just in the US alone, 44 people were murdered, majority of which were murdered specifically because they were trans. And American news, so this is broadcast news, only spent a collective 54 minutes covering any of these stories across 23 news segments, according to Media Matters. Link to that in the transcript, not transcript, the agenda. I should know it's called the Trans Agenda after all. It should also be noted that the vast majority of these, that the vast majority of these minutes was covered by NSNBC, who accounted for more than half the coverage at 31 minutes across 10 segments, so less than half of the segments, but more coverage extensively. It should also be noted that only 9 of these 23 total segments mentioned the name of the murdered trans person. So even when they do report, the vast majority of them don't even mention the name of the trans person, which is kind of a shocking fact because it makes it very difficult to empathize with that person. I don't create timestamps during the stream. I do it after, so if you could hold off on that. So anyway, it should also be noted that the one time Fox News covered the topic was when Tucker Carlson lied, asserting that the epidemic of anti-trans violence was, quote, factually untrue, end quote, and asserting that, quote, transgender people are, on average, safer than your typical American, end quote, which is a lie parroted by various different conservatives, including Blair White. I did a video response to Blair White recently on that. And just to clarify, Latino trans women are between 1.4 and 48 times more likely to be murdered than Latino cis women, and that 1.4 is accounting for the the highest trans population, and we have every incident recorded. So it's definitely going to be higher than 1.4, and potentially 48 times more likely. When it comes to black trans women, on the other hand, this number is between 2.35 times more likely and 74.9 times more likely. I've just received a super chat from Shakira Miguel, $5 super chat. Thank you very much, Shakira. It is much appreciated. There was no message, however. If you didn't mean to write a message, you can always write a message on the side. I will try picking it up. The idea of trans people being safer is based on taking the largest trans sample, all of them are being reported, and only looking at white people. Because it is slightly different for white trans people. That does not actually mean that it is necessarily safer for them. There's a lot of underreporting when it comes to the murder of trans people, and there's various different reasons for this. One is the fact that very often they're posthumously erased. They're misgendered, both in official documents and in the news. This report, which is, by the way, the only report on the topic, which is how I know this is the source Tucker Carlson is using, because it's the only one. The only way they could find out the numbers was based on the tracking of, I think it was either Human Rights Watch or the Human Rights Campaign mentioned earlier, one of these groups. Literally, they're reliant on news reports because the official documentation isn't equipped to actually tell us how many trans people die. You have to assume some pretty favorable circumstances to make this argument, and it leaves out the picture that no matter what, trans women of color are far more likely to be murdered than cis women of color, controlled sample. So you compare trans Latino women to cis Latino women and trans black women to cis black women. So yeah, just want to make that clear. This whole thing, however, and the reason that it's important to note this, is there's this narrative that the trans conspiracy has control over the media, and yet when it comes to trans deaths, we're receiving next to none of the coverage, at least in the US. So again, it's completely odd at that. Yeah.